All right, well, we're here with you today from the EWRC Business Technology, Media and Technology Studio. And today we're sharing a little bit about the African to African American Network, AFAFnetwork.com. That's our theme music right there. Let the walls come down. This is a ministry, it's an outreach, it's a program that is presenting African and American culture in a biblical and kingdom light, not only for Africans and African Americans, bridging that gap, but then all the people of God. It's a kingdom program. And so we have our theme song here. You can check that out more later. Let the walls come down. Hallelujah. Let the walls come down. Music will be available soon, but we're going to flip over and look at our website for a minute and just talk a little bit about our mission and purpose of the African American Network. So our purpose and mission is captured in the phrase celebrating kingdom culture. Celebrating kingdom culture. So we're first dealing with earthly culture when we talk about Africans and African Americans. And Africans and African Americans all have a culture just like every other race on the earth. Everybody has a culture. There's no use running or pretending like we don't have that because we're Christians, because we still have a race and we still have a culture. And so we know this, and there's some particular issues and things to address that relate to African culture and African American culture, because African Americans have a blood tie back to Africa. And so Africans and African Americans, we have a very special relationship on the earth because our blood lines run together and our history runs together. However, there is a greater culture than Africans or African Americans or any other culture, which could be Hispanic or European or any number of Slavic and all the different cultures of the world, Indian culture. They're all important on the earth and have their own meaning. But there's a culture that brings all of the cultures together, and that is the kingdom culture. And so there is coming a time, the Bible teaches us, where the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our God. So we're all coming together. So we talk here about African American Network, our mission, through our own cultural recognition and presentation of the gospel, praise, and worship. We encourage unity for all God's people. We present African and African American history and culture with kingdom and biblical perspective. So what do we mean? What we're saying is we talk about African culture. We will learn. I'm certainly learning way more and more about African culture. Shout out to my friend Bryce. Hey Bryce, that shit gave me the Zambia hat this last weekend at a men's retreat because they're doing a lot of wonderful work in Africa with the missions they're involved. And today I've got my partner, one of my great partners, Pastor Jimmy Fayambo of Living Faith, who's going to come in a minute and tell us about the latest mission trip that they were on. So we talk about African culture. We have a special care for learning about not only the culture, but the history, culture and history. But we start with praise and worship, where we all come together and we talk about how all the cultures come together. So we talk about AFAF Network recognizes the unique cultural position of African Americans within the melting pot of the United States of America. The African American population is unique in that as a culture and people group, we came to the United States as a slave population, not as an immigrant population. This fact produced some distinctly different aspects to the development of the African American culture in the United States. So the point is, we came over here with a specific story. That story was we were largely brought in slavery. We did not immigrate over here of our own free will or desire. So we came in slavery. At least when we were here, we were slaves. So it's a slave population that started but there's a story behind it and how God made us free. But that gave us a unique culture, not quite like any other culture that came over here, any other immigrant population, because they didn't come mainly as slaves. We did. So now, since the ancient Hebrew culture documented in the Torah, which is the Bible, books of Moses in the Old Testament, wisdom and freedom can be found in taking God's revelation into account as we view history and culture. So we use God's revelation to understand history. We use God's revelation to see history in its proper light from God's perspective. And so we want to see the history and the culture, but let's see it the way God presents it. And then we talk here about the scripture in Exodus 3:4, and the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, talking about the Hebrews back in the days of the Bible and the slavery in Egypt. He said, I've seen their oppression. They are in Egypt. I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters. That's the slave owners of that day. And I know their sorrows. Exodus 3:7. So God says, I know what's going on. I understand. I do care. And that's what he said then, and that's how he is now. He has cared, and he has paid attention to what was going on. So we talk about all the flavors of culture and how the Bible reveals it, and then we take a kingdom perspective on everything. And with that kingdom perspective, we look at it that we are people of the book, and we understand the spiritual and historical significance of the scriptures, the Bible. So I'm going to bring up our missionary that came on the mission trip, and we'll bring that segment to you next. But we just he's going to talk a little bit about the recent mission trip to Liberia, and it came right here from our own partner, Pastor Jimmy Fayambo and Sarah Fayambo. I know also went over there was John and Kiera, John Fayambo. And so we want to let him tell us a little bit about what was going on. We were certainly here praying and supporting that trip. And we have many African missionaries and friends that are out sharing the gospel on these mission trips. So on this segment, we just wanted to introduce it to you. In the next segment, we will be introducing the mission and the mission trip from Liberia. Thanks for joining us today. That's the basic mission. We'll talk a lot more about the vision and what we have going on, but we'll come back to you in a second with the mission trip to Liberia. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Cut.